Father Serafino, thank you very much for joining me. It's so nice to see you again.
Thank you, Gavin, for inviting me.
Well, and thank you for the hospitality I enjoyed with your community. I just thought you had some marvelous people in your community, and it was wonderful to meet you all. And so thank you for having me there. And thank you especially for being willing to talk about the crisis that we're facing in terms of the document that the DDF produced recently and our response to it. So I thought I'd begin by asking you, when you heard, we were going to begin by asking you how your filial submission went, because when the paper was produced, you quite rightly sent an appeal to our Holy Father saying a number of things. You thought that not enough emphasis had been given to the magisterium, that there was an overreaction to co-redemptrix, that insufficient theological depth had been applied to the problem, and you hoped that it might be corrected. So first of all, will you tell me what response you had both from theologians and then also any political response you've had, and then we'll talk about the latest news from the Vatican itself.
Right. Yes. Thank you. This is a very good point, because as we remember, the DDF produced this Mater Populi Fidelis document or note, Mariological note, which in my opinion is quite a minimalist approach and undermining the role of the Blessed Virgin Mary in her salvific contribution to our salvation. So I felt that need to speak out and say this approach to our Blessed Mother is not correct. It's not even along the lines of Vatican II, of Lumen Gentium. It says even less, much less than Vatican II. And this is quite astonishing, because we want to be conciliar. We want to be always, according to Vatican II, but that document, in fact, was much more, said less than what we find in Vatican II, where although there is no mention of co-redemption, for a precise reason, it is explained. Co-redemption is not mentioned in Vatican II for the sake of ecumenism, but the fathers held that term completely orthodox and Catholic, but just avoided it for the sake of, not upsetting the Protestants.
Can I just ask, was it also the case that it would upset the Orthodox, or was it, which I don't mind quite so much, or was it an attempt to go for the lowest common denominator with the Protestants?
It was only for the Protestants, I think, because in my study of Vatican II, I realized that there is very, no importance given to the dialogue with the Orthodox. So when Vatican II understands ecumenism, or when the Council Fathers speak of ecumenism, even especially during the debates in the Conciliar Hall, they normally have in mind the Protestants, the Western, schism, not the Orthodox. And this is something, a lack of ecumenism.
Can we take a moment to look at that point without losing the trajectory of our conversation?
Sure.
So first of all, one of the experiences that many of us have had is that Protestants find anything to do with Our Lady very difficult indeed. There are a whole series of visceral reactions, sometimes some reflex, some visceral. Theologically, they find it impossible from their reading of scriptures, which is always a kind of first generational thing. They see no development there. There's a spiritual matter too, which is that often their eyes glaze over and they repudiate her with a ferocity that suggests this is not just a rational conversation. How is it possible that the fathers of the Second Vatican Council thought that by downplaying the fidelity of the Catholic Church to Theotokos, they would in any way make an impact on this profound revulsion within Protestantism with what they think the Catholic Church has done to the doctrine of the ingenue Jewish teenager who just happened to get pregnant and give birth to Jesus? I mean, Can they have been so naive?
Yes, this is a good point. Have they been so naive? Well, I think if we put ourselves in their shoes, they were really thinking that a new approach, a new pastoral, as they said, approach would encourage this dialogue with the Protestants. I think with the aim of bringing Protestants along with the Catholic doctrine and perhaps explaining it later. Were they naive? I don't think they were really naive, but they were hopeful, in my opinion. But now, judging this kind of move after 50 years, we should say that that understanding of a Catholic doctrine, Marian doctrine, in a pastoral way, hasn't produced the fruits they were hoping for. And that cannot bear any fruit because the clarity, doctrinal clarity is necessary. And the pastoral method, as detached from doctrine, even to the point of becoming itself the new doctrine, the new way to not only deliver the doctrine, but the new way to assert it, the new way to propose it, and of course, in the end, becoming itself a new doctrine, isn't the right approach and the right way to bring Protestants along. And the Mater Populi Fidelis is the very final straw, if you want. It's the very completion of that mentality of Vatican II, that by underplaying Our Lady's role, we would, be more friendly with the Protestants and bring them along. But Mater Populi Fidelis is saying very little about Our Lady and about her cooperation, not simply about her co-redemption, but about Our Lady's active, direct cooperation, which is very necessary to be affirmed in order to say that there is a cooperation in the divine person of our Lord between the human nature and the divine nature. The human nature of Christ cooperates with the divine nature. And as the human nature of Christ does cooperate, Our Lady's human nature, of course, cooperate with Jesus. And we, all Christians, need necessarily to cooperate with Christ through Mary for our salvation. Otherwise, there is no salvation. So,
And the word cooperate has exactly the same prefix and
yeah,
means the same way as co-redemptrix.
yes,
It doesn't mean that there is a 50-50 sharing of the process. It means one fully engages with it. We cooperate, she cooperated. So essentially, I think what you're saying, if I can just repeat it for my own clarity, is that I shouldn't have used the word naive. I should have said underinformed, really. But anyway, the hypothesis that by going light on Marian dogma, Protestants might begin to want to meet us halfway, has been proved, as you say, to be a mistake. It didn't happen.
yes,
In which case, having discovered it's a mistake, it's now time to remedy it and to
yes.
express greater devotion, greater faith, greater clarity. And that's presumably what you're saying. That's exactly what Mater Populis Fidelis didn't do.
Right. And that was a shock to me because I really was hoping that after so many years we would understand it. But then having such a document, which is undermining, of course, Our Lady's cooperation, not simply co-redemption or a title, which is difficult to be understood. The problem with Mater Populi Fidelis is the doctrine of cooperation. By reducing it to the very minimum, and at times by putting it in a very passive way, that is shocking. And I thought to myself, they are not. Now the lesson was not understood, and we are doing even somehow worse than before. And that was my prompting to say something that led me to to even write a filial appeal for the faithful, to say something with the faithful, because the document wants to encourage Marian devotion, popular devotion. But do the people understand that Our Lady has an active role in their lives? My simple point is that we say that Our Lady is our mother. We believe that Our Lady is indeed, right, our spiritual mother. Now, if Our Lady is our mother, she needs necessarily to have an active role in our lives, to generate us to supernatural life. Otherwise, she's not our mother. She's symbolically our mother. But can Mater Populi Fidelis deny that Our Lady is our mother? No. And the consequence is that to be our mother, she cannot simply be a spectatrix of our salvation. She needs to generate us.
Yes.
And the only possible generation is her compassion. If you want to say it in another way because you don't like co-redemption, say compassion, say active cooperation, which means the same thing. And, but it seems again that Mater Populi Fidelis is not, at peace with the same cooperation, compassion, the Compassio Maria, which is the very doctrine of Our Lady's active generation of each single Christian. So she's our mother because she has generated us to eternal life.
I think that's very beautiful. I love the idea of comparing compassion to co-redemptrix, and also that's a spectacularly good comparison. If you don't do that, you reduce her to spectatrix. I mean, that's very powerful. I'm going to lower the tone for a moment, partly to ask for pastoral help and tell you a story. The intention behind this is to ask you what you think the mindset is amongst those who wrote the document, because so there was a time when I had a BBC radio program, and one of the people I used to interview was the local diocesan bishop. He has, in fact, he's one of the few bishops who had to resign in disgrace. I'm not going to mention his name. We don't need to do that, but I say that only to clear all the other bishops. And after the radio show, we were having coffee together, and I said, "Well, Father, what are you doing this month?" And he said, "Well, I'm taking the diocesan pilgrimage to Lourdes." And I said, "Well, that's so wonderful, really. How lucky you Catholics are to be able to go to Lourdes and to honor Our Lady there." And wasn't it astonishing that the Bernadette's experiences, and how lucky you are, wonderful. And he looked at me with some scorn and pity and said, "What, you don't imagine that these apparitions were real, do you? This was the fact is, this was a teenager not dealing with her emotions very well, and as it happens, what's come out of it is a very nice pilgrimage center. We get together, we have nice journeys there, and we enjoy the journey, but we don't take this literally." And I was absolutely, completely, I was gulfed, because I was just discovering Our Lady, and I'd been blown away by the fact that when she approached her parish priest, a man of some theological competence, and she kept on reminding herself of the phrase, "I am the Immaculate Conception," because it wasn't any kind of the part of the linguistic vocabulary such a girl would have. And this was the point when he heard this, the parish priest, as you know better than I do, but I'm just rehearsing it for our listeners, said, "Goodness me, this has to be authentic. This peasant girl cannot have picked up this precise theological language that is de rigueur in a moment amongst people having serious, so it must be Our Lady." I found it I wanted to say to this bishop, how is it possible that you, a Catholic bishop, would demythologize this event, even in the light of the miracles and the devotion and the love, the dependence? Why do you think that? In the end, it wasn't my place to do it, and I didn't do it. And as it happened, it turned out that he had a private life that was incompatible with his episcopal responsibilities, and he resigned. But I was still shocked that one could hold high office in the Catholic Church and have such a low view of Our Lady, and in a sense, without imputing anything to Cardinal Fernandez or to the theologians in the dicastery, I still find it quite difficult to understand why they would want to minimalize Our Lady, because one of the great joys of being a Catholic is to immerse oneself in the depth of her role, not only in incarnation, but actually in the ongoing spiritual life of the believer and of the Church. Do you have any sense of what politically, theologically, spiritually lies behind this wish to continue this cul-de-sac of diminishment that the document represents?
Well, I think the problem behind the document is minimalism, the Marian minimalism, which is not something starting with post-Vatican II experience or that kind of ecumenical approach to Our Lady, because indeed, Our Lady is a problem, if you want, from an ecumenical political point of view, because the Protestants don't like cooperation. They don't understand it. They don't want it. Jesus does everything because man is completely corrupted by his saints. He doesn't do anything good. So, if you want to present to, if you want to start anew, as it was, envisaged, a new dialogue with the Protestants, you don't speak much about Our Lady, and you try to undermine, or better, to reduce to the very minimum Our Lady's, contribution. That is the problem. But that minimalist approach is, in fact, a more an ecumenical way, but it doesn't begin necessarily with the reception of Vatican II in that kind of, exuberant way to say we are new Catholics, we can start something new, we have a chance, to become one again and in a different way, and so on. That minimalist approach has its roots, of course, in the Protestant Revolution, if you want, but also in a dogmatic Mariological realm. That minimalist approach has its roots in a dispute which began even before Vatican II. And you were mentioning Lourdes. There is an interesting congress which was held in Rome for the centenary of Our Lady's apparition in Lourdes, 1858, so 100 years after the apparition of Our Lady of Lourdes. And during that congress, very international Mariological congress, the problem about, Mariology came about, the problem of a Christotypical or ecclesiotypical Mariology approach to Our Lady came about. Normally, those who prefer a kind of nuanced, more ecumenical approach to Our Lady are more ecclesiotypical. They tend to reduce Our Lady to a mere member of the church, to say that Our Lady is in function of the church, and therefore she prepares somehow the church, but she is dependent totally on the church. That kind of vision has had somehow a kind of majority, even though very little majority in Vatican II. But that was the very reason for choosing a minimalist approach to the Blessed Lady. The Christotypical approach, that is, Our Lady's role in Christ and her privileges to be highlighted, was something seen as an old-fashioned Roman theology, now to be somehow sidelined in order to favor this new, more ecumenical, more pastoral approach. So I think the problem is in this ecclesiotypical accent put on Mariology, which doesn't work, because a true Mariology, a very well-balanced Mariology, should always be something anchored to first Christ and then to the church. So Our Lady is mediatrix between Christ and the church. And Mater Populi Fidelis, in fact, has an ecclesiotypical approach, where there is very little said about Our Lady in Christ, her cooperation in Christ, to focus her activity solely somehow on the church and under the church. As someone receptive, as the church receives salvation from Christ, she does as well. Of course, that is unbalanced. And Vatican II itself, of course, already in the title, chapter 8 of Lumen Gentium, chose Our Lady in the mystery of Christ and the church. She must be in between Christ and the church. That is a correct, I think, approach to Mariology.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Let's move from theology, though it's a shame, to politics, which is very much less important, but nonetheless has to do with our motivation and our understanding of what is happening. When I was a boy, I used to enjoy watching Westerns, and at the critical moment, the heroes of the Western would suddenly discover the United States cavalry riding to the rescue over the hills, bugles blowing, and then the good guys would win the battle. And I think there's a kind of instinct in many of us that when there's a crisis going on, we want the rescue party to sweep in and win the battle immediately. So I think a lot of us hoped instinctively, perhaps it is now we who are naive, perhaps naively, that when Pope Leo was appointed, he would put right many of the things that Pope Francis had quite clearly got wrong. Traditionis custodes, first of all, and then those things that were cooking under Francis, and Mater Populis Fidelis was one of them, would be dealt with, and perhaps a promotion could be found for Cardinal Fernandez somewhere, and the work that he'd been done would be put into a drawer and marked confidential or something. So it was really quite distressing to hear a week or so ago that the Pope had visited the DDF and complimented all the people who worked there and praised them on their work. And initially, this seemed to me to be a sign that, and indeed a lot of traditional commentators said this out loud, I think before they'd had time to think it through, but it may be that they're disinclined to trust the Pope, whereas I'm inclined to trust him. And as I thought more, it seemed to me that I was underestimating the complexity of how one does politics in the Vatican. There is nothing to be gained from making a whole dicastery your enemy, declaring civil war on them, unless you're going to simply sack them all and replace them with other people. But on the whole, the costs of doing that often outweigh the benefits. So it began to seem to me that perhaps he was asking more traditional Catholics to pay the price of waiting whilst he worked through a more complex strategy than we can be privy to. And if that's the case, then there still remains some considerable hope that the Pope will have the intention of putting right the excesses of his predecessor, but might be doing so in a more politically sophisticated or complex way than we grasp. And I wonder what your view was on this balance between the expectation he would sweep in and mend everything that had gone wrong against the longer, more sophisticated political strategy.
Right. Yes, it's not easy to understand the Vatican strategy or the Pope's strategy to govern such a complex entity, which is the Catholic Church. Of course, I was myself a bit, taken by that address the Pope gave to the DDF recently, and by praising the work of the DDF. But if you look at the document more attentively, of course, the Pope is also praising the DDF and Cardinal Fernandez for producing Mater Populi Fidelis, which explains something more, and it is a valid, good document, together with another document which is quite Mariologically speaking, it is an issue about the assessing supernatural phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, to read that is quite, surprising, if you want, because Mater Populi Fidelis, as said by many theologians and experts in that field, is something, very, very deficient. There are some big problems with that. But if you I wanted immediately, by reading the document, to react, to say, Holy Father, how can you say that? Mm. But if you let the dust settle and then you read it more calmly, you understand that, for example, the Pope is listing only the documents produced in the last 2 years, starting with 2024. He should have started with 2023, if you want, because there is a very bombshell document produced in 2023, which is Fiducia Supplicans.
Yes.
And fiducia supplicans is not praised. Why? So there is something. There is a method used by Pope Leo. Why is he praising only the last few documents? Because he has chosen few in the last production, and this is Francis' production. I was and then trying to understand why. I read an analyst, an Italian Vaticanist, Gagliarducci, who has always very good pieces out, and according to him, that very well, thought about list of documents was rather saying that the Pope is now closing an experience started with Pope Francis and inaugurating a new way, a new direction to give to the DDF. And that is even clearer from, the way he addressed the line, the production of theological production of the dicastery under Fernandez. Does it seem that Pope Leo is also organizing a new head for the dicastery? It is not that certain, but according to this Vaticanist, what is certain is that the Pope is now closing an experience and opening a new one. And of course, this is my hope. But I was convinced then that Pope Leo had to say that word of praise for Mater Populi Fidelis, for these notes about the supernatural phenomena, but without believing it properly. There is a kind of void between what he says and has to say politically, if you want, in that context, and what he believes. Why? Because last Saturday, this is a news which has not been, carefully analyzed. The Pope received in the Vatican Gardens, some people from Peru, and in that occasion he blessed a new mosaic of Our Lady in the Vatican Gardens and the statue of Saint Rose of Lima.
Yes.
By there is a beautiful prayer for blessing that icon mosaic of Our Lady, which is in Spanish. The discourse the Pope gave is in Spanish, and the prayer is in Spanish. I went carefully through the prayer many times. I got a dictionary to understand correctly what he was saying. And this is something great, because the Pope said, Our Lady is collaborator of Christ. She is a cooperator. He uses in colaboradora in Spanish. She's cooperator with Christ. And also he says she is the new Eve. The new Eve who repaired what was ruined by the first woman. Well, that is great. This is redemption about.
This is not minimalist.
This is not. And this is also in line with another homily he gave in July when he called Our Lady the new Eve at the foot of the cross.
Yes.
So, but then, if you now compare these words by Pope Leo with Mater Populi Fidelis, and I did so, you see that in Mater Populi Fidelis, Our Lady as New Eve is mentioned only once in the text, only historically, to say that the fathers have called Our Lady New Eve, and who are these fathers? And then in the footnote, they explain a little bit more the historical journey of the New Eve, but without expressing the very doctrine of the New Eve, which is the doctrine of the one who generated us and the one who made right with her obedience, with her true cooperation, what the first Eve did wrong with her disobedience. So, Gavin, the point is, on the one hand, we have Pope Leo trying politically, I would say, to say to have to be polite to the dicastery for the faith. But on the other hand, and that was consoling to me, he personally doesn't believe what the document Mater Populi Fidelis says, because in fact he said the right opposite. Of course, we would like to have one sentence, one direction to be given. But it is also to be understood that to govern the church, as you said, is not that easy. And also, I heard from a priest who has very good sources, and he said that he spoke with a cardinal, and this priest said that Pope Leo has been elected for fixing all the things which were made wrong by Pope Francis, but he must not say it. He has to do it without saying it. And we see that with some, new interventions, and especially in the Vatican, he's trying to fix, also with the new laws, he's trying to fix many gaps left by the previous pontiff. So I would, I feel a bit encouraged, and I would say we should hope that Pope Leo will, at some point, once he has more experience with the Curia, once he has a Curia coming along with his leadership, if he may feel more confident in being more, giving more one single direction where all documents, all speeches, mean one single thing.
That's very encouraging, and also, I mean, it confirms my intuitions. Before we started, we were talking very briefly as we explored the direction our conversation might take, and it seems to me that the power plays and the complexities of political reality in a place like the Vatican must be enormously complex. And Pope Leo, of course, had been there 2 or 3 years only, and in that time was unlikely to be able, and he was not a very senior member of the institution, he would be unlikely to have developed a close personal following. And in a sense, I think people overestimate the power they think the Pope has. Of course, he has enormous power of patronage and the power of example, setting a good influence. But if you're dealing with people who are intransigently opposed to you, apart from sacking them, you run the risk of provoking and creating non-compliance, essentially. And so I can well believe that there's a political language that will work best strategically to cause a minimum amount of damage, whilst living alongside a more vibrant theological language. And one of the reasons why I've always believed in Pope Leo is that I see in his eyes, and I hear in his voice, and I discern in his prayers exactly the kind of piety you've described, something that is entirely orthodox, Catholic, without reserve, without pretense, without dissimulation, not at all minimalist. And so I'm very encouraged you should take that view too. And it's very helpful, but it hadn't occurred to me. I hadn't read the documents closely enough. And it's also the fact that Fiducia Supplicans wasn't there hasn't struck many people, but the fact that it wasn't there is enormously significant. And thank you for pointing it out. So I share.
There is hope. Yeah,
there is hope. That's wonderful. Good. Do you expect to have any news about your filial submission, or
right?
What was your strategy? Was it well, by putting it there, you allow people to coalesce in support, you allow affection and allegiance to Our Lady to verbalize and to become concrete? What was your strategy, and what do you think will happen?
Yes, my idea of strategy, as you say, was to write something for the people. I made an analysis, a theological analysis, which was published by Diane Montagna on her Substack. That was more a theological approach to the document, to say to those who have to understand and can understand that the document is, as it is written, is not good. And at times there are some even, it's quite problematic for the way it approaches the mystery and Our Lady's co-redemption. And thanks be to God that my vision was also shared by other theologians, not only theologians who agree with co-redemption, but for example, in Italy, there is this Father Salvatore Perrella, who was the head for some time of the Marianum, the Mariological institution in Rome, who was not happy with the document at all. And he was very honest. He said, I don't agree perfectly with the term co-redemptrix, but the document as it is written is not good. It's not theological. And there are many, many, many errors and problems, better to say, with the document. So after analyzing more in depth the document from a theological point of view, I thought to myself, now I should do something for the lay people, and I was requested by some lay people to write a kind of a little text, short text, very easy to understand, to highlight the main problems present in Mater Populi Fidelis, so that other people could, with that text, say something and manifest publicly their concern, and that could even reach the Holy Father. So the idea, that is the reason why I produced that filial appeal to the Holy Father. With my intention was, to stay, to remain anonymous somehow, but then my name was was revealed. It was also good to say who wrote it in order to be more, more precise and credible. So the idea was to give the faithful the capacity, with a text, to say we share the Catholic faith, we believe that Our Lady is our mother, therefore she is co-redemptrix, she is mediatrix of all graces. Therefore, Holy Father, please do something that the document may be corrected. And I was very much pleased by the fact that even in Chiclayo diocese, which was the diocese where the Pope was the bishop for some time, the people signed the petition. They made a petition. Then
Really?
great.
Fantastic. His own people joined you. That's very good news.
The people from Chiclayo in Peru, Lima also, they produced a filial appeal that was sent to Rome, signed by many, many people, I think hundreds, and it was sent to Rome, and of course they put it in a way that Pope they call him Pope Robert, that Pope Robert could understand, and I do hope that Chiclayo appeal has reached the Holy Father, so that he can see that there is a pastoral problem, there is an issue coming from the people of God, because the document is addressing the people of God. It is good that the people made their voice heard, and they say that the document is not, according to the Catholic standard you expect a document to be.
I think any appeal directed to Pope Robert is bound to find its way to his heart. Before we finish, can I ask you, just in case you have any reflections on the drama with the SSPX recently, and also Traditionis Custodes? My own view is that it was probably some Vatican administrator who refused to grant the SSPX a proper interview, and they talked about getting a letter from the Holy See rather than the Pope. It looks to me like it's the kind of the annoying mix-up that trouble the administrators cause, rather than a direct rebuff from the Holy Father, from Pope Robert. And I'm very hopeful that Traditionis Custodes will find some serious modification when the cardinals come together for their second round in the summer. We'll wait and see. But did you share those views, or do you have different perspectives on this?
Well, I was very happy that the text produced by Cardinal Roach was leaked, so that everyone could say it, could read it, and I'm sure that somehow that text must be discussed among the cardinals, and the fact that we may produce more interventions and may discuss this in preparation for that is very, very good. And I would encourage the liturgists, those experts in that field, to speak out and to encourage the cardinals to pick up that important issue, which should be the first, I think, in the next consistorium of cardinals. And I think Pope Leo has that intention. Also, Bishop Schneider, who recently gave an interview, he said that in his private meeting with the Pope told him, that was in December, I think, that in the next consistorium, they were going to discuss the problem of the Tridentine Mass. So the liturgical point was put there by Pope Leo for discussing the Traditionis Custodes and a possible, opening to the traditional mass. But the cardinals chose not to speak about the liturgy. But that is very interesting. Pope Leo himself wanted that topic to be discussed, so it must be discussed at some point. And another piece of news, I think I read it just a few hours before our meeting today, and Cardinal Fernandez is going to see next week Father Pagliarani, who is the Superior General of the SSPX. So the SSPX, Father Pagliarani was hoping to have a meeting with the Pope, because they said, we want to, to be fair to the Holy See. Whatever we want to do is not, to oppose the Holy Father, the Holy See, or the Church, but to do anything in communion with the Church. So an audience has been granted, but Cardinal Fernandez is going to now meet Pagliarani, Father Pagliarani, and discuss I think the doctrinal issue linked with the ordinations. My view is that I really hope that the Holy See and Pope Leo now may be more, open to this discussion and find a possible way forward for having them back officially, canonically in the Church. That is urgent, and it is also a matter of justice, I think. In this synodal church, where Father James Martin is welcome and can speak and can do his apostolate freely, it is not conceivable that the SSPX, fully Catholic in their teaching, in their views, may not have a place, a canonical place, to officially and in communion with, visible communion with the Church, exercise their ministry. So I do hope that Pope Leo may consider attentively this matter for the sake of the unity of the Church.
Well, you've given us something to pray for this next week. That's very exciting. Father Serafino, it's always wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for giving us your time, and also for sharing in the optimism and, or rather the hope. It's a theological virtue, not a psychological approach. So we have hope. Anyway, thank you. It's been really wonderful to talk to you. I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.